The ceiling was wrong. Nora Chin stared at the water-stained ceiling above her bunk bed, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The last thing she remembered was the cold, sterile smell of a hospital room, the beeping of machines growing fainter, and the hollow emptiness of dying alone at 32. Now she was lying on a thin mattress, the familiar scratch of cheap university sheets against her cheek, the faint hum of a dormitory air conditioning unit, the muffled sound of someone laughing in the hallway. She sat up so fast her head spun. Her hands, they were smooth. No scars. No liver spots. No 4 bruises. She held them up in the dim light filtering through the cheap blinds, turning them over, flexing her fingers. Young hands. Strong hands. Hands that hadn't yet been broken by the world. The room came into focus around her. Dormitory room 412. Jiangnan University. 2 bunk beds. 4 desks piled with textbooks and loose papers. Posters of Korean boy bands on the walls. The smell of instant noodles and laundry detergent. This was her old life. No, she whispered, her voice cracking. This isn't. But it was. The calendar on her phone, she grabbed it from the bedside table. The old Xiaomi model she'd had in her 3rd year, read September 3rd. 8 years ago. The year everything began to fall apart. Nora pressed a hand to her mouth, a sob clawing its way up her throat. She remembered this day with horrifying clarity. In approximately 12 hours, the thing that would destroy her life would begin. She looked at the empty bed across from hers. Her roommate, Li Meng, was probably still in the bathroom, but the bed below hers, the one with the pink floral sheets and the fairy lights, that bed belonged to Suyun, her best friend since freshman orientation. The girl who had held Nora's hair back when she was sick, who had stayed up with her through all-nighters, who had cried with her over breakups and laughed with her until they couldn't breathe. The girl who, tomorrow morning, would ask Nora to come with her to the train station, to help her say goodbye properly to Nora's boyfriend, Zhou Yiming, who had decided he and Suyun were going to run away together. Nora closed her eyes, and the memories came flooding back like poison being squeezed from an old wound. In her first life, she had gone to that train station. She had begged. She had cried. She had grabbed Suyun's arm and pleaded with her not to go. She had confronted Zhou Yiming, called him a traitor, screamed at him in front of everyone. She had made a scene, a desperate, pathetic scene fueled by the belief that if she just loved them enough, if she just held on tight enough, they would stay. They had not stayed. Zhou Yiming had shoved her to the ground. Suyun had looked at her with cold contempt and said, "You always had to ruin everything, didn't you?" They had gotten on that train together, holding hands like lovers in a cheap melodrama. And then, the aftermath. They hadn't actually gone far. They'd rented a cheap apartment in the next city, played house for a few months, and then come crawling back when the money ran out. But they didn't come back to Nora. They came back to the university, and they came back with a story. Suyun told everyone that Nora had been jealous, obsessive, controlling, that she'd made up lies about them because she couldn't handle Zhou Yiming wanting someone else. Zhou Yiming backed her up. He said Nora had been unstable 4 months, that she'd threatened Suyun, that he'd had to step in to protect her, and the worst part, people believed them. Nora had always been the quiet one. The serious student. The girl who took things too seriously. Suyun was sunshine and charm. The life of every party. Zhou Yiming was tall and handsome and popular. They made a convincing pair. The star-crossed lovers escaping the clutches of a crazy ex-girlfriend. The rumors spread like wildfire. Professors heard whispers. Her scholarship committee received an anonymous email. Her parents got calls. Within a year, Nora had been isolated, humiliated, academically destroyed. She transferred to a worse university, her transcript permanently stained. Her relationships with her family never fully recovered. Her mental health spiraled. She had spent the next 7 years trying to rebuild, a mediocre job, a string of failed relationships, therapy that never quite took, and then the diagnosis. Cancer, the kind that ate you from the inside out. She had died in a rented apartment, alone. At 32 years old, watching reruns of a drama she used to love in college. And now she was here. September 3rd, 8:07 a.m. 12 hours before Suyun would come to her, tearfully confessing that she was so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen, but Yiming and asked Nora to come to the station. Nora opened her eyes. The water stain on the ceiling looked exactly the same as it had 8 years ago. The world hadn't changed at all. But she had. Slowly, deliberately, Nora swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood up. Her body felt strange, lighter, more agile, the joints not yet worn down by years of stress and sorrow. She walked to the small mirror tacked to the wall beside her desk. The girl who looked back at her was 21. Clear skin, bright eyes, dark hair that fell to her shoulders in the blunt cut she'd always favored. She was pretty, not the kind of pretty that stopped traffic, but the kind that grew on you. A face people trusted, a face she now knew how to weaponize. Nora, you're up early. She turned. Li Meng stood in the doorway, a towel draped over her shoulder, her face still half asleep. Li Meng, the quiet roommate who kept to herself, who Nora had barely known in her first life beyond polite greetings and occasional study sessions, couldn't sleep. Nora said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Too much on my mind. Li Meng nodded vaguely, too tired to pursue the conversation. She shuffled to her desk and began rummaging for her hairbrush. Nora watched her for a moment, then looked at Suyun's empty bed again. The fairy lights were still off. Suyun was probably at the gym. She always went for a morning run, desperate to maintain the figure that Zhou Yiming had complimented her on once in passing. Zhou Yiming. Even thinking his name felt different now. The old Nora would have felt a pang of heartbreak, a twist of longing. The new Nora felt nothing but a cold, clear certainty. She sat down at her desk and pulled out her laptop. The machine was ancient by any standard, thick, slow, the fan rattling like it was about to take flight. But it would do. She opened a new document. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. In her first life, she had been a woman of impulse and emotion. She had loved too hard, trusted too freely, and broken too easily. She had learned, too late, that the world didn't reward the soft-hearted. This time, she would be different. She began to type. Plan of action. *1. Phase 1, documentation. Do not intervene. Let them proceed. Photograph and record everything. Times, dates, conversations. Build a file so complete that no one can dispute it. 2. Phase 2, notification. Alert the university administration anonymously. Provide just enough evidence to trigger an investigation without exposing myself. Let the institution do the work. 3. Phase 3, isolation. Do not become the villain of their story. Remain calm, cooperative, and wounded. Let the truth emerge from the facts, not from my anger. 4. Phase 4, new life. Detach completely. Focus on my studies, my future, and the people who actually matter. Do not let their poison define another 8 years of my life. She saved the document with a simple title. Operation Clear Water. Nora sat back and stared at the words on the screen. The plan was cold, calculated, and ruthless. The old Nora would have been horrified by it. The new Nora found it deeply satisfying. Her phone buzzed. A message from Suyun. Hey girl, morning run was amazing. Want me to grab you some breakfast from the cafeteria? Nora stared at the message. The heart emoji, the casual warmth, the innocent question from a woman who was, at this very moment, planning to steal her boyfriend and destroy her life. In her old life, Nora would have replied with a string of hearts and a request for steamed buns. She would have smiled at the message, grateful for such a thoughtful friend. She typed back. Sure. Whatever's easy. Thanks. Short. Neutral. Unremarkable. She hit send and set the phone aside. There was a new kind of power in knowing the future. Not the power of superheroes or time travelers, but something subtler and more dangerous. The power of patience. The power of watching pieces fall into place because you already knew exactly where they would land. Nora stood and walked to the window. The campus sprawled below her, the main courtyard with its fountain and stone benches, the long avenue of plane trees that led to the academic buildings. The cluster of coffee shops and convenience stores near the East Gate. Students were already moving about, backpacks slung over their shoulders, phones in their hands, living their ordinary lives on an ordinary September morning. They had no idea what was coming, neither did Soo-Yun or Zhou Yiming, but Nora knew, and she was ready. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Zhou Yiming. Free for lunch. Want to talk about something? She read the message 3 times. In her old life, this would have been the message that made her heart soar. He never initiated lunch dates. This must be something special, she would have thought. Maybe he's finally going to say he loves me. Now she knew better. This was the prelude. He was going to sit her down, hold her hand, and tell her that things have changed, and I've been thinking about what I really want. Some vague, gutless preamble to the betrayal that would come the next morning. She typed back, sure. Meet you at the East Gate cafeteria at 12. Perfect. See you then. Nora set the phone down and looked at herself in the mirror again. The girl staring back had pale cheeks and dark circles under her eyes. She looked fragile. She looked breakable. Good. Let them see fragility. Let them see weakness. Let them underestimate her completely. This time, the girl who broke would not be Nora Chen. The morning passed in a blur of calculated normalcy. Nora attended her 10 a.m. lecture on modern Chinese literature, took notes with mechanical precision, and did not flinch when Soo-Yun slid into the seat beside her halfway through, smelling of lavender soap and smiling like nothing was wrong. You okay? Soo-Yun whispered, her hand brushing Nora's arm. You seem quiet today. Just tired, Nora said, not looking up from her notes. Soo-Yun made a sympathetic noise and turned her attention to the lecture. She was good at that, appearing concerned for exactly as long as social expectations demanded, then moving on to more important things. At noon, Nora walked to the East Gate cafeteria. The building was a sprawling 2-story complex that served mediocre food at inflated prices. But it was the most popular spot on campus because it had the best air conditioning. Students packed the tables, hunched over trays of noodles and rice dishes, their conversations creating a dull roar that echoed off the concrete walls. Zhou Yiming was already there, seated at a table near the window. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of effortlessly handsome face that made people trust him without question. Dark hair swept back from his forehead, a neatly trimmed jawline, and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He smiled when he saw her approaching, that genuine-looking smile that had once made her heart flutter. Hey, Nor. He stood and pulled out the chair across from him. Thanks for coming. She sat down and arranged her face into a mask of pleasant curiosity. You said you wanted to talk about something. He nodded, his expression shifting to something approximating seriousness. Yeah, look. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About us. About where we're going. Nora kept her face perfectly still. She knew what was coming next. In her old life, she had been blind to the pattern he was setting, the way he was softening her up for the blow. I care about you a lot, he continued, reaching across the table to take her hand. You know that, right? I know, she said. Her voice came out soft and trusting, exactly as it should. But I think I need some space to figure things out. He sighed, running his free hand through his hair. It's not you. It's me. I've been feeling trapped lately, like I don't know who I am anymore. Nora almost laughed. Trapped. He felt trapped. In a relationship with a girl who adored him, who did everything for him, who had never asked for anything except his honesty. The audacity was breathtaking. I understand, she said instead, squeezing his hand. Everyone needs time to themselves. Take all the space you need. He looked surprised by how easily she accepted it. Maybe he'd expected tears, arguments, the same scene she'd made in her first life. He had no way of knowing that those tears had already been cried. That argument already lost. Really? He asked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. You're not mad. I could never be mad at you. Yiming. She smiled, a small, sad smile that she had practiced in the mirror that morning. I just want you to be happy. The guilt that flickered across his face was almost cartoonish. He swallowed, nodded, and looked down at the table. Good. Let him feel guilty. Let that guilt fester. It would make everything that followed that much sweeter. They ate lunch in strained conversation, talking about classes and weather and everything that meant nothing. When they parted at the cafeteria door, he gave her a hug that lasted a beat too long. As if trying to memorize the feeling of her, Nora walked back to her dormitory alone. The September sun was warm on her shoulders, the campus alive with the noise of students rushing between classes. She passed the old courtyard, the fountain spouting its thin stream of water, the stone benches where couples sat huddled together. She saw Soo-yeon sitting on one of those benches, her phone in her hand, a secret smile playing on her lips. She was texting someone. She was probably texting Jo Yiming, confirming their plans, arranging the final details of their escape. Nora kept walking. She did not stop. She did not look back. Let them have their secret smiles and their whispered plans. Let them think they were being clever. She had already taken her first photograph, a wide shot of Jo Yiming's face across the cafeteria table. Time-stamped. The conversation captured by the voice recorder app she had hidden in her bag. Phase 1 was underway, and she had all the patience in the world. That evening, Nora lay in her bunk, staring at the same water-stained ceiling she had woken up to. The lights were off. Li Meng was already asleep in the bed across the room, her breathing soft and regular. Soo-yeon's bed was empty. Soo-yeon had told her she was going to study at the library tonight. She had kissed Nora on the forehead and said, "Don't wait up. I might be late." Nora knew exactly where she was going. To the old railway bridge behind the East Campus, where Jo Yiming would be waiting. They would hold hands, make plans, talk about their future together. They would convince themselves that what they were doing was romantic, that they were star-crossed lovers making a bold choice. They had no idea. Nora reached for her phone. She opened the camera and reviewed the photos she had taken that day, the screenshots of Soo-yeon's messages, the recording of her lunch with Jo Yiming, the time-stamped images of her movements. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, she would let them walk into their own destruction. But tonight she let herself feel the strange, hollow ache of second chances. She was 21 years old again. She had time. She had knowledge. She had a plan. And for the first time in 8 years, or 8 seconds, depending on how you counted, she had hope. She closed her eyes and let the dark take her. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Nora woke at 6 the next morning, 15 minutes before her alarm. The dormitory was still quiet, the gray light of dawn filtering through the blinds. She lay still for a moment, listening to the sounds of her roommates sleeping, and let the memories of her previous life settle around her like an old coat. Today was September 4th, the day Soo-yeon would come to her, tearful and apologetic, asking for her blessing. The day Jo Yiming would send his final message, claiming he was doing this for both of them. The day they would board the 2:37 p.m. train to Hangzhou, hand in hand, believing they had escaped. In her first life, Nora had spent the morning crying, pleading, trying to reason with people who had already made up their minds. She had called Jo Yiming 17 times. He had answered once, only to tell her to stop being dramatic. She had confronted Soo-yeon in the dormitory bathroom, grabbing her arm, begging her to explain. Soo-yeon had pulled away with a look of disgust that Nora had replayed in her nightmares for years. This time, she did none of those things. This time, she got out of bed, showered, dressed in her most ordinary clothes, and went to the library to study. She brought her laptop, her textbooks, and a thermos of black coffee. She found a seat on the second floor, near the window overlooking the courtyard, and she opened her notes on modern Chinese literature. She did not check her phone. She did not wait for their messages. She simply sat and studied, the way she had done 1,000 times before, as if today were the most ordinary day of her life. Her phone buzzed at 9:47 a.m. Soo-yeon. Hey, can we talk? It's important. Nora read the message. She took a sip of her coffee. She set the phone face down on the desk and continued reading. It buzzed again 2 minutes later. Please, Nora, I need to tell you something. Then, from Jo Yiming at 10:12 a.m. I'm sorry about everything. I hope you can forgive me someday. Nora read each message in turn. She felt nothing. Not the crushing heartbreak of her first life. Not the rage she had expected. Not even the satisfaction of knowing she was right. Just a quiet, clinical emptiness. Like a surgeon looking at a wound that no longer belonged to her. At 10:30 a.m., she finally replied to Soo-yoon. I'm in the library. Come find me if you want. She kept her tone light, accommodating, the tone of a friend who had no idea what was coming. She wanted Soo-yoon to confess. She wanted to hear the words with her own ears, to have them recorded on the voice memo app that was already running on her phone. Soo-yoon arrived 15 minutes later, her face a mask of carefully constructed sorrow. She was wearing a sundress. Nora noticed, the yellow one that Zhou Yiming had once said made her look like sunshine. She had clearly dressed for the occasion. Nora, she whispered, sliding into the seat across from her. Thank you for seeing me. Nora closed her textbook and gave Soo-yoon her full attention. She kept her expression open, concerned, the picture of a good friend ready to listen. You sounded upset. What's going on? Soo-yoon wrung her hands, a gesture she had perfected over years of practice. She looked down at the table, then up at Nora, her eyes glistening with rehearsed tears. I don't know how to say this. I've been trying to find the right words all morning. Just say it, Nora said gently. Whatever it is, we can figure it out. It's about Yiming. Soo-yoon let out a shaky breath. I know this is going to hurt you, and I hate myself for it, but I love him, and he loves me. We've been seeing each other behind your back for 3 months, and we can't hide it anymore. The confession tumbled out in a practiced rush, as if she had rehearsed it in the mirror. Soo-yoon took Nora's hand across the table, her fingers warm and trembling with manufactured emotion. I never meant for this to happen. I fought it. I really did. But some things are stronger than friendship. Nora looked at their joined hands. Soo-yoon's nails were perfectly manicured, painted a soft pink. She had had them done yesterday. Nora realized. She had gotten her nails done on the day she planned to destroy her best friend. I see, Nora said softly. She let her eyes fill with tears, not difficult. Given how many tears she had shed over this in her first life, the emotions were still there. Somewhere, buried beneath years of bitterness. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. We tried so hard to protect you. Soo-yoon squeezed her hand. Can you forgive me? Forgive her. The audacity of the question was staggering. In what universe did I slept with your boyfriend and were running away together? Warrant forgiveness. I need some time, Nora said, pulling her hand away gently. This is a lot to process. Of course. Of course. Soo-yoon nodded eagerly. Take all the time you need. But, we're leaving today. Yiming and I. We're going to Hangzhou together. To start a new life. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Today. Nora let her voice crack slightly. You're leaving today. The train is at 2:37. Soo-yoon's eyes were bright with excitement, barely concealed behind her mask of regret. I'm sorry it's so sudden. We can't stay here. Not with everything we've done to you. Nora nodded slowly, looking down at her hands. If this is what you really want, then I won't stand in your way. Soo-yoon's head snapped up, genuine surprise flickering across her face. Really? What good would it do? Nora said, her voice soft and defeated. I can't make someone love me. If Yiming loves you, then I have to accept that. Oh, Nora. Soo-yoon came around the table and wrapped her in a tight embrace. She smelled like lavender and cheap perfume. You're so strong. I knew you'd understand. Nora let herself be hugged. She let her body go limp and trembling, as if she were barely holding herself together. She even let a few tears escape, rolling silently down her cheeks. The voice memo app on her phone, tucked face down on the table, captured every word. Soo-yoon pulled back, wiping her own eyes dry. Nora noticed. Despite the emotional performance, I should go. Yiming is waiting for me at the station. I couldn't leave without seeing you one last time. Goodbye, Soo-yoon. Nora looked up at her, letting all the years of friendship flicker in her eyes. I hope you find what you're looking for. Soo-yoon smiled, that bright, sunny smile that had always made people love her. You'll find someone too. Someone better. You deserve it. And then she was gone. her yellow sundress disappearing through the library doors, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender and the lingering echo of her betrayal. Nora sat perfectly still for a long moment. Then she reached for her phone, stopped the voice memo, and played it back. Soo-yeon's voice filled her ears, clear and unflinching, confessing to 3 months of deception. She saved the file to her cloud storage, the university cloud server, and a backup hard drive she kept in her desk drawer. Triple redundancy. No single point of failure. Phase 1 was complete. Now for Phase 2. She packed her laptop and walked to the main administration building, a gray concrete structure that housed the offices of the dean, the disciplinary committee, and the student affairs department. She had already composed the email in her draft folder. Time to send at 1:00 p.m., just early enough for the administration to act, but late enough that Soo-yeon and Jo Yiming would already be committed to their plan. The email was addressed to the Dean of Student Affairs. It was polite, formal, and devastating. It contained no accusations, no demands, no emotional appeals, only facts. The names of 2 students who had expressed their intention to leave the university without formal withdrawal, the train number and departure time, a brief description of the circumstances. Attached were screenshots of Soo-yeon's confession messages and a transcript of the voice recording. The tone was not vengeful. It was concerned. It was the email of a student who had discovered disturbing information and felt it was her duty to report it. For the good of the university community, she scheduled the email and closed her laptop. At 1:30 p.m., she walked to the train station. She did not go to intervene. She went to observe. The station was crowded, as it always was on weekday afternoons. Business travelers with suitcases, students with backpacks, families with crying children. Nora found a seat at a cafe near the main concourse, ordered an iced tea, and watched the boarding gates. At 2:15, she saw them, Soo-yeon and Jo Yiming, walking hand in hand through the station, their faces bright with anticipation. Soo-yeon was wearing a different dress now, white, with small blue flowers, a suitcase trailing behind her. Jo Yiming carried a duffel bag over his shoulder and looked like the lead actor in a travel commercial. They stopped near Gate 7, embracing, laughing, stealing kisses like teenagers in a romance movie. They looked happy. They looked free. They looked like they had won. Nora watched them through the lens of her phone camera, snapping photos in rapid succession. The timestamp would prove they had been at the station together, without her. At 2:37, the train to Hangzhou arrived. Soo-yeon and Jo Yiming boarded, still holding hands, still laughing. The doors closed behind them. The train pulled away. Nora watched it disappear into the distance, a metal snake carrying 2 people toward their own destruction. She finished her iced tea, paid the bill, and walked back to campus. The first call came at 4:30 p.m. It was Jo Yiming's mother. Nora was in her dorm room, reading a novel, when her phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. She let it ring. When the voicemail notification appeared, she listened with clinical detachment. Nora, this is Jo Yiming's mother. I don't know if you know where he is, but he didn't come home today, and he's not answering his phone. The university just called me. They said he's withdrawn from school. Can you please call me back? The second call came at 5:10 p.m. Soo-yeon's father. Then the third at 5:45 p.m. The Dean of Student Affairs himself. Nora answered that one. Miss Chen, the dean said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. I received your email. I need to ask you some questions. Of course. Dean Zhang, Nora said, her voice soft and cooperative. I'll tell you everything I know. And she did. She told him the truth, or at least, a version of it, that Soo-yeon had confessed to her that morning, that she had been heartbroken but had accepted their decision, that she had sent the email out of concern, not retaliation, that she had no idea where they were going or when they would be back. She was the picture of a wounded but responsible student, doing her civic duty despite her personal pain. Dean Zheng thanked her and hung up. Nora sat in the silence of her dorm room, alone for the first time that day. Li Meng was at her evening class. Soo-yeon's bed was still made, the fairy lights unplugged. The room felt emptier than it had this morning, as if the betrayal had sucked the air out of the space. She lay down on her bed and stared at the ceiling. She had done it. She had watched them fall without lifting a finger to stop them. She had recorded their confessions, documented their escape, and triggered the administrative response that would ensure they couldn't just come back and pretend nothing had happened. In the original timeline, they had returned after 3 months, hatched their lies, and destroyed her. This time, the university would have a record. Their parents would know the truth. The narrative would be set before they even had a chance to rewrite it. She should have felt satisfied, victorious, vindicated. Instead, she felt tired, deeply, bone-achingly tired, as if the effort of not intervening had been greater than the effort of intervening would have been. She closed her eyes and let herself drift. When she woke, it was dark outside. The digital clock on her desk read 9:47 p.m. Someone was sitting at the desk below her bunk, a soft light illuminating their face. For a moment, Nora's heart seized. She thought it was Soo-yoon, come back already, ready to spin her lies and start the campaign of destruction. But it was Lee Mang, her quiet roommate, sitting with a textbook and a cup of tea. She looked up when she heard Nora stir. "Hey," she said softly, "I heard what happened. About Soo-yoon and your boyfriend." Nora's stomach tightened. Word travels fast. Lee Mang nodded. "The whole floor is talking about it. Everyone says you handled it really gracefully, that you let them go without a fight." "What else was I supposed to do?" Nora asked. And the question was not entirely rhetorical. Lee Mang was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Most people would have screamed. You didn't. That takes a certain kind of strength." Something in Nora's chest loosened. Just slightly. She had expected suspicion, judgment, maybe even accusations. She had forgotten that some people could still see things clearly. "Thanks, Mang. Get some rest," Lee Mang said, turning back to her book. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Nora lay back down, staring into the dark. Lee Mang was right. Tomorrow would be long. There would be questions from the administration, calls from parents, whispers from classmates. She would have to navigate all of it without revealing the cold, calculating machinery running beneath her calm exterior. But she would manage. She had survived worse. She had survived dying alone in a hospital bed. This was nothing. She closed her eyes and, for the first time in 2 days, slept without dreaming of the past. The week that followed was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Nora had anticipated that Soo-yoon and Jo Yiming's disappearance would cause a stir, but she had underestimated the scale of it. By Wednesday, the story had spread beyond the dormitory floors and into the wider student body. By Friday, it had reached a level of notoriety that made Nora's head spin. The official narrative, carefully shaped by Dean Zhang's office, went something like this. 2 third-year students, Soo-yoon and Jo Yiming, had abandoned their academic responsibilities without formal withdrawal, causing significant distress to their families and the university community. The female student's roommate, Nora Chen, had reported the situation to the administration out of concern for their well-being. The university was cooperating with the families to locate the students and ensure their safe return. The unofficial narrative, which spread through WeChat groups and whispered conversations, was more salacious. Soo-yoon had stolen her best friend's boyfriend. They had run away together like lovers in a drama. The betrayed girlfriend had been left behind, broken-hearted but dignified. Nora was careful to maintain her position in this narrative. When classmates approached her with sympathy, she accepted it gracefully. When they pressed for details, she demurred with a sad smile. When they expressed outrage on her behalf, she said things like, "They must have had their reasons," and, "I just want them to be safe." She was becoming a saint in the eyes of her peers, and she knew exactly how to play it. The messages from Soo-yoon and Jo Yiming had stopped after the day they left. Their phones were either dead or deliberately turned off, but their parents were calling Nora daily, asking for information she pretended not to have. "They didn't tell me where they were going," she told Soo-yoon's mother on Thursday evening, her voice heavy with rehearsed sadness. "I wish I could help more." "That girl," Soo-yoon's mother muttered, her voice tight with fury. "When I get my hands on her." Nora said nothing. She let the silence speak for her. By Saturday, The administration had tracked Su Yun and Zhou Yiming to a rented apartment in Hangzhou through their bank transactions. The university sent a formal notice demanding their immediate return for a disciplinary hearing. Their parents were making arrangements to retrieve them. The end was coming. Nora could feel it. The day they returned was a Tuesday. Nora was in the library when Li Meng sent her a message. They're back. Su Yun is in the dormitory. She looks different. Nora closed her textbook and packed her bag. She had known this moment was coming, had prepared for it, had rehearsed it in her mind 100 times. But the reality of seeing Su Yun again, of looking into the eyes of the woman who had destroyed her first life, made her stomach churn. She walked back to the dormitory slowly, giving herself time to compose her face into the right expression. Surprise, concern, a hint of lingering hurt. When she opened the door, Su Yun was sitting on her bed, her suitcase at her feet. She looked nothing like the radiant girl who had boarded a train 8 days ago. Her hair was unwashed and pulled into a messy bun. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. She was wearing the same clothes she had left in, wrinkled and faded. She looked, Nora thought with clinical satisfaction, like someone who had discovered that running away doesn't actually solve your problems. Nora, Su Yun said, her voice cracking. Nora stopped in the doorway. She let her bag slide off her shoulder. She let her face register shock. You're back. I know we shouldn't have left. I know everything is. Su Yun buried her face in her hands. It was a mistake. It was all a mistake. Nora walked slowly to her desk and sat down. She kept her distance, letting the physical space between them communicate what words could not. What happened? She asked softly. Su Yun looked up, her eyes wet. We got to Hangzhou, and everything was great for like 2 days. We found this little apartment. We bought groceries. We acted like we were playing house. And then, she laughed bitterly, a sound like breaking glass. Then reality hit. We ran out of money. Yiming couldn't find a job. We argued about everything. He started blaming me for convincing him to leave. I started blaming him for being useless. Nora listened without interrupting. She had known this was how it would go. Zhou Yiming had never held a job in his life. He had coasted through college on his charm and his parents' money. Su Yun had never faced real consequences for anything. Put them together without a safety net, and the result was inevitable. Our parents found us. Su Yun continued, her voice flat. My dad came to Hangzhou personally. He said the university is holding a disciplinary hearing. We could be expelled. Expelled. Nora. I'm sorry, Nora said, and the words tasted like ash in her mouth. Don't. Su Yun's eyes sharpened, a flicker of the old fire returning. Don't pretend you're sorry. I know you're the one who reported us. Nora's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her face still. I reported to the dean that you had left. I was worried about you. Worried. Su Yun laughed again. That same bitter sound. You were worried. That's why you sent an email with screenshots of my messages and a transcript of our conversation. I documented what you told me because I was concerned about the university's policies. I didn't know what else to do. Bullshit. Su Yun stood up, her hands shaking. You planned this. You sat there in the library, acting all heartbroken, letting me confess. And you recorded everything. You set a trap for us. Nora stood too, meeting Su Yun's gaze with calm, steady eyes. I didn't set a trap. I simply didn't stop you. There's a difference. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and final. Su Yun's face crumpled. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but no words came out. She sank back onto her bed, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Nora watched her for a long moment. The old Nora would have gone to her, wrapped an arm around her, told her everything would be okay. The new Nora felt nothing but a quiet, distant satisfaction. I have a study group, she said, picking up her bag. I'll be back later. She walked out of the room and closed the door behind her, leaving Su Yun alone with the consequences of her choices. The disciplinary hearing was held on Thursday afternoon in the main conference room of the administration building. Nora was called as a witness. She had dressed carefully for the occasion, a simple white blouse, dark pants, minimal makeup. She looked professional, trustworthy, and appropriately somber. She sat in the hallway outside the conference room, waiting for her turn, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The door opened, and a student walked out. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that fell across his forehead in a way that suggested he had run his hands through it one too many times. He was wearing a simple gray sweater and carrying a stack of notebooks. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and something flickered in Nora's chest. Recognition, she thought, but not the kind that came from memory. It was something deeper, something she couldn't name. "You're next," he said, his voice low and even. "They're almost done with the other witnesses." "Thank you," she said. He nodded and started to walk away, then stopped. "You're Nora Chen, aren't you?" She blinked, surprised. "Yes. How do you know my name?" "Everyone knows your name." His expression was unreadable. "You're the one who didn't stop them." The words were neutral, but something in the way he said them made Nora feel like he understood more than he was letting on. "And you are?" she asked. "Gu Ming." He shifted his notebooks to one arm. "I'm the graduate assistant for Dean Zheng. I've been helping organize the hearing documents." Graduate assistant. That meant he was a graduate student, probably in his final year or working toward a master's. Nora had never noticed him in her first life, or if she had been too consumed by her own drama to pay attention. "It must be a lot of work," she said. "It is," he agreed. "But it's interesting. You learn a lot about human nature when you read disciplinary files." There was a pause. Nora felt suddenly aware of the silence in the hallway, the way the afternoon light fell across his face, the small scar above his left eyebrow that she hadn't noticed at first. "Good luck in there," he said, and walked away. Nora watched him disappear around the corner. The feeling in her chest lingered, warm and unfamiliar. She filed it away for later consideration. Right now, she had a hearing to attend. The conference room was larger than she had expected, with a long wooden table at the center and portraits of former university presidents lining the walls. Dean Zheng sat at the head of the table, flanked by two other administrators. Su Yun and Zhou Yiming sat on one side, their parents behind them. A stenographer was typing notes in the corner. Nora took the seat indicated for her, directly across from the couple. Zhou Yiming would not meet her eyes. He stared at the table, his jaw tight, his hands clasped in front of him. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished by the weight of his choices. Su Yun, on the other hand, stared at Nora with undisguised hatred. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked like someone who had been betrayed, as if she were the victim in this room. Dean Zheng cleared his throat. "Miss Chen, thank you for joining us. We just have a few questions." "Of course," Nora said. "I'm happy to help. Can you confirm that you were aware of Miss Su and Mr. Zhou's plans to leave the university before they departed?" "I was aware that Miss Su intended to leave with Mr. Zhou. She told me on the morning of September 4th. And you chose not to stop them." Nora paused. She let her gaze drop to the table, let her shoulders slump slightly. "I tried to talk to them, but they had made their decision. I didn't think I had the right to force them to stay." "Did you encourage them to leave?" "No. I told them I was sad, but that I wouldn't stand in their way if that was what they really wanted." Dean Zheng nodded, making a note. "And the evidence you provided, the recordings and screenshots. When did you collect them?" "The recordings were from my conversation with Su Yun in the library. I recorded it because I was emotional. I wanted to be able to listen back and make sure I hadn't said anything I would regret." She let her voice waver slightly. "The screenshots were from messages they sent me." It was a flimsy explanation, and she knew it, but it was also plausible. Heartbroken people did strange things. Recording a painful conversation was the least of it. Dean Zheng didn't press further. "Thank you, Miss Chen. You may go." Nora stood and walked out of the room without looking back at Su Yun or Zhou Yiming. She had done her part. The rest was up to the administration. The verdict came 2 days later. Su Yun and Zhou Yiming were both placed on academic probation for 1 semester, required to complete 100 hours of community service, and mandated to attend counseling sessions. Their parents were fined for the cost of the university's efforts to locate them. They would be allowed to continue their studies. but with a formal disciplinary record that would follow them for the rest of their academic careers. It was, all things considered, a lenient punishment, but for Soo-yoon and Jo Yiming, it was devastating. The probation meant they could not hold any student leadership positions, apply for scholarships, or participate in exchange programs. The disciplinary record meant their graduate school applications would be marked before they even began. And the social fallout, the whispers, the judgment, the loss of status, would be worse than any official punishment. Nora read the verdict on her phone while sitting in the campus coffee shop, a cup of chamomile tea cooling beside her. She felt nothing. No joy, no satisfaction, no triumph. The revenge she had planned so carefully had been executed flawlessly, and all she felt was a quiet emptiness. Maybe that was what revenge was supposed to feel like. Not the explosive catharsis of movies and novels, but the cold silence of a debt paid. She took a sip of her tea and looked out the window. The campus was golden in the autumn light. Students walking between buildings. Leaves beginning to turn. Life was continuing, as it always did, indifferent to the small dramas playing out within it. Through the window, she saw a figure approach the coffee shop. Tall, dark hair, carrying a stack of notebooks. Gu Ming. He pushed open the door, and the little bell above it chimed. He saw her, hesitated, then walked to her table. Mind if I sit? She gestured to the empty chair across from her. Be my guest. He sat down, setting his notebooks on the table. I heard the verdict came out. News travels fast. It's a small campus. He studied her for a moment, his gaze steady and thoughtful. How are you feeling? It was such a simple question, and yet no one had asked her that in the past week. Everyone had asked for information, for explanations, for her version of events. No one had asked how she was feeling. I'm not sure, she admitted. I thought I would feel something. Relief. Closure. But I mostly just feel tired. That's normal, he said. Revenge is exhausting, even when it's justified. Nora's eyes snapped to his face. What makes you think this is about revenge? He met her gaze without flinching. The level of preparation, the calmness of your testimony, the fact that you had evidence ready before you even knew it would be needed. He leaned back in his chair. You're not the victim in this story, Nora. You're the architect. Her blood ran cold. She had been so careful. How did this stranger see through her so easily? I don't know what you're talking about, she said, keeping her voice steady. Yes, you do. He smiled, but it wasn't a cruel smile. It was almost admiring. Don't worry. I'm not going to tell anyone. I just wanted you to know that someone sees you. He stood, gathering his notebooks. If you ever want to talk to someone who understands, someone who's been through their own version of this, my number is in the university directory. And then he was gone, leaving Nora alone at her table, staring at the space where he had been sitting. The chamomile tea had gone cold. She didn't drink it. October arrived with a chill in the air and the first hints of autumn color spreading through the campus like a slow fire. Nora had settled into a rhythm of deliberate normalcy. She attended her classes, studied in the library, ate her meals in the cafeteria. She spoke to Li Meng when their schedules aligned. She answered messages from her parents with cheerful reassurances that everything was fine. She did not speak to Soo-yoon. After the hearing, Soo-yoon had been moved to a different dormitory room on the floor below. The administration had arranged it, citing conflict resolution protocols. Nora was grateful for the separation. She did not want to see Soo-yoon's face every morning, to be reminded of the years of friendship that had ended in betrayal. She saw Jo Yiming once, across the courtyard. He was walking with his head down, his shoulders hunched, a shadow of the confident young man who had once held her hand and promised her the world. He did not see her. She did not call out. That chapter of her life was closed. She had no desire to reopen it. Instead, she focused on the future. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined not to waste it. In her first life, her academic career had been derailed by the scandal, her transcripts stained by transferred credits and unfinished semesters. This time, she would graduate with honors. She would pursue the graduate degree she had always dreamed of. She would build a life that had nothing to do with Soo-yoon or Jo Yiming or the mess they had made of everything. The first step was midterms. She threw herself into her studies with a ferocity that surprised even herself. She stayed up late reviewing lecture notes, woke early to read assigned texts, attended every office hours session her professors offered. Her grades, already good in her first life, became exceptional. Professor Li, who taught her modern Chinese literature seminar, pulled her aside after class one day. "Miss Chen, your recent essays have been outstanding. Have you considered applying for the graduate program?" Nora's heart swelled. In her first life, she had been too distracted by the scandal to pursue any academic opportunities. The praise felt like validation, proof that she was on the right path. "I've thought about it," she said carefully. "I'm not sure I'm ready yet." "You're more than ready," Professor Li said firmly. "I've been teaching for 20 years. I know talent when I see it." The words stayed with Nora for the rest of the day. She walked back to her dormitory with a lightness in her step, feeling, for the first time since her rebirth, something like hope for the future. But the future, she would learn, had a way of arriving before you were ready for it. She saw Gu Ming again on a Thursday afternoon. She was in the library's East Reading Room, hunched over a stack of books on Chinese economic history, when someone set a cup of coffee on the edge of her table. She looked up. Gu Ming was standing there, a second cup in his hand, looking at her with that same unreadable expression. "You looked like you could use a break," he said. She glanced at the stack of books, then at the coffee. "You're not wrong." He sat down across from her, pushing a stack of her books aside to make room for his own notebook. "Economic history. That's a heavy topic for a Thursday afternoon. I have a paper due next week. I'm trying to get ahead." "Admirable." He took a sip of his coffee. Most people would procrastinate until Sunday night. Most people haven't seen what procrastination costs. The words came out sharper than she had intended. She saw a flicker of surprise cross his face and forced herself to soften. "Sorry, I've been studying too long. I'm not very good company right now." "That's okay. I'm used to bad company." He smiled, a small, crooked smile that transformed his face. "I've been working on Dean Zhang's disciplinary files for 3 months. I've read enough student confessions to last a lifetime." "That sounds depressing." "It has its moments. But it also gives you perspective." He leaned back in his chair. "You start to see patterns. The same mistakes. The same rationalizations. The same excuses. After a while, you can predict who's going to fall and how hard they're going to hit." "And what pattern did you see in my case?" she asked, curious despite herself. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "The pattern of someone who's been hurt before. Someone who learned to protect herself by thinking 3 steps ahead." He looked at her directly. "Which makes me wonder what happened to you before any of this." Nora's breath caught. He was too perceptive. This stranger with the steady gaze and the quiet voice. He saw things that no one else saw. "Nothing happened that I care to discuss," she said, turning back to her book. "Fair enough." He didn't push. Instead, he pulled his notebook closer and started writing, as if they had been studying together for years. They sat in silence for the next hour. The library hummed with the quiet sounds of study, pages turning, keyboards clicking, the occasional cough. The afternoon light shifted through the windows, casting long shadows across the reading room. At 5 o'clock, Gu Ming closed his notebook and stood. "I have a seminar in 20 minutes. Thanks for letting me share your table. You bought me coffee. I think that earns you a seat. I'll hold you to that." He paused at the edge of the table. "There's a poetry reading at the old bookshop on Saturday evening. If you're looking for a break from economic history." It was almost an invitation. "Almost. I might stop by," she said, keeping her voice neutral. He nodded and walked away, leaving his coffee cup on the table, half empty. Nora stared at the cup for a long moment. Then she turned back to her book. But the words had become blurry, and her mind was elsewhere. She did not go to the poetry reading. She told herself it was because she had too much studying to do, too many papers to write, too many lectures to prepare for. But the truth was simpler and more frightening. She was not ready. Not ready to let someone new into her carefully controlled world. Not ready to trust, to open up, to risk being hurt again. The scars from her first life were still too fresh, even if her body was young and unmarked. So she stayed in her dorm room on Saturday evening, reading a novel she had already read twice before, while Li Meng was out with friends and the campus hummed with weekend energy. Her phone buzzed at 9 o'clock. A message from an unknown number. The poetry was mediocre, but the tea was good. You missed out. G.M. Nora stared at the message. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Unbidden. She typed back. I'll catch the next one. His reply came immediately. I'll hold you to that. She set her phone aside and picked up her novel. But she couldn't stop the warmth spreading through her chest. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of academic work and quiet routines. Nora continued to excel in her classes, continued to avoid Suyun and Zhou Yiming, continued to rebuild her life piece by piece. The scandal had faded from the forefront of campus gossip, replaced by newer dramas and fresher scandals. She was grateful for the anonymity. She saw Gu Ming a few more times, in the library, in the courtyard, once in the cafeteria line. They exchanged nods, brief smiles, the unspoken acknowledgement of two people who had recognized something in each other, but they did not have another real conversation. Nora told herself she preferred it that way. She was not ready for anything more. And then, on a cold October evening, she found out why Gu Ming had understood her so well. She was in the graduate assistant's office, dropping off a form for Professor Li, when she overheard a conversation through the open door of the adjoining room. Gu Ming's story is still the talk of the department, even after 2 years. A voice was saying, the way he handled that plagiarism accusation, he didn't just handle it. Another voice replied, he destroyed the accuser, had evidence prepared weeks before the hearing, got the other student expelled. Cold. That kid is cold. He had to be. You know what the accusation cost him. Lost his scholarship. Almost got kicked out of the program. If he hadn't prepared that evidence. Nora's hands went cold. She stood frozen in the hallway. The form clutched to her chest. So that was it. Gu Ming had been through his own version of her story. Someone had tried to destroy him, and he had fought back with the same careful preparation, the same cold documentation, that she had used. No wonder he had seen through her so easily. He recognized a fellow traveler. She walked away from the office without delivering the form. Her mind racing. She needed to process this information, to understand what it meant. But one thing was clear. She was not as alone as she had thought. The evening air was cold enough to sting her cheeks as Nora walked across campus 2 days later. A scarf wrapped around her neck and her hands shoved deep into her coat pockets. She had been avoiding the graduate assistant's office since overhearing that conversation. Not sure what she would say to Gu Ming if she ran into him. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. She found him sitting on a bench near the old fountain, the one that had been dry for years and served mostly as a meeting point for students. He was reading a book, his breath misting in the cold air, a paper cup of tea balanced on the arm of the bench. He looked up as she approached, and that crooked smile appeared. Fancy meeting you here. I could say the same. She hesitated, then sat down on the other end of the bench. It's freezing. Why are you sitting outside? My roommate is having a loud phone call with his girlfriend. I needed somewhere quiet. The library exists. The library doesn't have fresh air. He closed his book and turned to face her. I heard you've been avoiding the grad office. So he knew. Of course he knew. I've been busy, she said, not meeting his eyes. Busy. Or trying to figure out how to ask me about what you overheard. Nora's head snapped up. How did you? Small department. People talk. He took a sip of his tea. Unbothered. You were in the hallway 2 days ago. You heard Wang and Lu discussing my case. And now you're sitting here, wondering if I'm a cold-blooded schemer or just someone who learned to protect himself. There was no anger in his voice, only a calm acceptance that made Nora's defenses feel foolish. Which one are you? She asked. Both. Neither. He shrugged. I was a second-year grad student. I had a research partner, someone I trusted. We were working on a paper together, our first big publication opportunity. And then, 2 weeks before submission, he accused me of plagiarism. Nora listened in silence. He had forged evidence, emails, drafts, notes, all doctored to make it look like I had stolen his work. The department believed him at first. My advisor put me on probation. I almost lost my scholarship." He paused, his jaw tightening, and then I found out why he did it. Why? Because I was a better researcher. Because the professor we were working with had hinted that I would be the first author on the paper. Because he wanted what I had. And destroying me was easier than earning it. Nora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "What did you do?" "I spent 3 weeks gathering evidence. I went through every email, every draft, every timestamp. I found the original files on my computer and showed that his versions had been edited after the fact. I got 3 other students to testify that he had admitted his plan to them. And then I presented everything to the disciplinary committee." He met her eyes. "He was expelled. I was reinstated. But the damage was done. The accusation had already tainted my reputation. Some professors still look at me like I might be a cheater." "I'm sorry," Nora said. "And meant it. Don't be. It taught me something important." He set his tea down. "Trust is a luxury. Preparation is a necessity. If you're going to survive in a world where people will lie to destroy you, you need to be ready before the attack comes. That's a lonely way to live. Maybe. But it's safer." He looked at her, his gaze steady. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you?" She did. She knew it in her bones. "Yes," she said quietly, "I do." They sat in silence for a long moment, the cold air wrapping around them like a blanket. The campus was quiet at this hour, most students indoors. The only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of wind through dry leaves. "I haven't told anyone the full story," Gu-ming said. "Not even my closest friends. But I think you deserve to know." "Why?" "Because you're the only person I've met who would understand without needing an explanation." Something shifted in Nora's chest. A wall, carefully constructed over years of betrayal and heartbreak, cracked just slightly. "Thank you," she said, "for telling me. Thank you for listening." He picked up his tea and stood. "I should get back. My roommate's girlfriend has probably hung up by now." She stood too, suddenly not wanting the conversation to end. "Gu-ming." He turned. "That poetry reading, is it a regular thing?" The smile that spread across his face was genuine and warm. "Every Saturday. I'll save you a seat. I'll be there." She walked back to her dormitory with lighter steps than she had taken in weeks, the cold air feeling less biting than it had before. The poetry reading was held in a small bookstore off campus, a 2-story building with creaking wooden floors and shelves that reached the ceiling. The shop smelled of old paper and tea, and a handful of mismatched chairs had been arranged in a rough circle near the front windows. Nora arrived early, still uncertain whether she was making a mistake. She had spent the past week oscillating between anticipation and fear, excited to see Gu-ming again and terrified of what that excitement might mean. But when she pushed open the door and saw him already there, 2 cups of tea on the table beside him, the fear quieted. "You came," he said, standing. "I said I would. People say a lot of things." He handed her a cup of tea. It was warm in her hands, the steam curling up toward her face. "I'm trying to be someone who keeps her word," she said. "That's a good goal." He gestured to the chair beside him. "The readings start in 10 minutes. The first poet is a 3rd-year philosophy student who writes surprisingly good love poems about existential despair. That's specific. You'll see." She sat down, and for the next hour, she let herself forget about revenge, about betrayal, about the complicated machinery of her second chance. She listened to poetry, some good, some terrible, all earnest, and she laughed when the philosophy student's 3rd poem turned out to be about the existential horror of cafeteria food. When the reading ended, she and Gu-ming were the last to leave. They walked out into the cold night together, their breath misting in the air. "Thank you," she said. "I needed that. Everyone needs poetry sometimes." He paused on the sidewalk, his hands in his pockets. "Can I walk you back to your dorm? It's out of your way." "I don't mind." They walked in comfortable silence through the quiet campus, past the dark academic buildings and the empty courtyard, the stars faint above the city lights. When they reached her dormitory, he stopped at the entrance. "Same time next week. I'll be there. I'll hold you to that." She watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller in the dim light. When she finally went inside, her cheeks were cold and her heart was warm. She realized, beginning to look forward to something again. The weeks that followed developed a gentle rhythm. Nora attended her classes, studied for her exams, and made it to the old bookshop every Saturday evening. She and Gu Ming would share tea and listen to poetry, and afterward they would walk the long way back to her dormitory, taking the path that wound through the botanical garden. They talked about everything and nothing. Books, music, the quirks of their professors, the absurdities of university bureaucracy. He told her about his research on modern Chinese economic policy, and she told him about her growing interest in literary criticism. They discovered shared opinions on authors they loved and hated, traded recommendations, debated the merits of different translations of Russian novels. But there were things they did not talk about: the details of her revenge, the full scope of his betrayal, the scars that both of them carried beneath their careful exteriors. It was too soon, Nora told herself. She needed more time. She needed to be sure. But every Saturday, she found herself looking forward to the evenings a little more. Every Saturday, the wall around her heart developed another crack. And every Saturday, Gu Ming was there, waiting with 2 cups of tea and that crooked smile. November arrived with the last of the autumn leaves and the first whispers of final exams. The campus became a hive of anxious energy as students realized the semester was almost over and they had not done nearly enough work. Nora was in the library, as she so often was, when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Can we talk?" Why? She stared at the message for a long moment. Su-Yun. She had not spoken to her former best friend in over 2 months, had not seen her except in distant glimpses across the courtyard. She considered ignoring the message, but she knew that avoidance was not a strategy. If she wanted to truly move on, she needed to face the remnants of her old life and close the door properly. "Where?" she replied. They met in the same cafe where Nora had watched Su-Yun and Zhou Yiming board their train. It was Nora's choice, a deliberate reminder of where this all began. Su-Yun was already there when Nora arrived, sitting at a table near the window, a cup of tea untouched in front of her. She looked different. The brightness that had once defined her was gone, replaced by a dullness that made her seem older than her 21 years. "Thank you for coming," Su-Yun said as Nora sat down. "You said you wanted to talk." "I wanted to apologize." Su-Yun's voice was thin, fragile. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. Genuinely sorry." Nora studied her across the table. The old Nora would have melted at these words, would have reached out and said, "Of course I forgive you." The new Nora was more cautious. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I've had time to think. Because everything fell apart. Just like you probably knew it would." Su-Yun laughed bitterly. "Yiming and I broke up 2 weeks ago. He blamed me for everything, for convincing him to leave, for ruining his future, for being the reason he has a disciplinary record. He said he never loved me, that I was just a distraction from his real problems." Nora said nothing. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me," Su-Yun continued. "I'm telling you because I finally understand what I did. I threw away a real friendship for someone who couldn't even stand to look at me after things got hard." She looked down at her hands. "You were a better friend to me than I ever deserved." The words hung in the air between them. Nora felt a flicker of something, not forgiveness, not sympathy, but a quiet acknowledgement of the truth. "I don't forgive you," she said slowly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I appreciate the apology." Su-Yun nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "That's more than I deserve." Nora stood. "Take care of yourself, Su-Yun." She walked out of the cafe and into the cold November air, leaving her past behind her once and for all. Winter arrived at Jiangnan University with a suddenness that took everyone by surprise. One day the campus was still clinging to the last remnants of autumn. The next, a cold front swept down from the north, and the temperature dropped below freezing. Nora pulled her coat tighter around herself as she walked across campus, her breath misting in front of her face. Finals were 2 weeks away, and the library was packed with students who had abandoned their procrastination habits in favor of desperate last-minute studying. She had found a corner on the 3rd floor, tucked away behind a shelf of obscure literary journals, where she could work in peace. It was there, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, that she found a note tucked between the pages of her textbook. It was a single sheet of notebook paper, folded into quarters. On it, in neat handwriting, "You look like you could use a walk. G.M." Nora smiled despite herself. She looked around the reading room but didn't see him. She folded the note and tucked it into her pocket, then closed her textbook and stood. A walk did sound good. She found him waiting at the library's side entrance, hands in his pockets, a scarf wrapped around his neck. He looked up as she pushed through the door, and that familiar crooked smile appeared. "Knew you'd come. How did you even know I was there?" "Lucky guess." He fell into step beside her. "You've been spending a lot of time in the library lately. I figured you could use a break." "Finals." She sighed. "I have 4 exams and 2 papers due in the next 3 weeks. I'm starting to forget what sunlight looks like. That's why I'm here. To remind you that the sun still exists, even if you can't see it from the library stacks." They walked along the main avenue, past the frozen fountain and the bare plane trees. The campus was quiet, most students huddled indoors. The only sound the crunch of their footsteps on the gravel path. "Can I ask you something?" Gu Ming said after a while. "You can ask. What are you planning to do after graduation?" The question was simple, but it carried weight. In her first life, Nora had never made it to graduation, at least, not with her plans intact. The question felt like a test, a way of measuring whether she had truly moved forward. "I've been thinking about graduate school," she said. "Professor Lee mentioned their program. I think I might apply. Literature. Modern Chinese literature. I want to study how narrative structures reflect social change in post-reform China." Gu Ming nodded slowly. "That's a solid research direction. Have you looked into the funding options?" "A little. I know there are a few scholarships available. If you need help with the application, let me know. I went through the process last year. I know how overwhelming it can be." Nora looked at him, surprised. "You'd help me?" "Of course. That's what people do for each other." The simplicity of the statement struck her. That's what people do for each other. She had forgotten that. In the years of betrayal and self-protection, she had built walls so high that she had forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. "Thank you," she said. "I might take you up on that." "I hope you do." They walked in silence for a few more minutes, their shoulders almost brushing. The cold air carried the faint smell of wood smoke from somewhere nearby. "There's something else," Gu Ming said, his voice different, softer. "I know we've been taking things slow, and I know you have your reasons for being careful, but I wanted to tell you something, in case I don't get another chance to say it the right way." Nora's heart rate quickened. "What is it?" He stopped walking. They were at the edge of the botanical garden, the greenhouse visible through the bare branches. He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I like you, Nora, not just as a study partner or a poetry reading companion. I like you." He paused, searching for words. "I know this is complicated. I know we both have things in our pasts that make trust difficult, but I needed you to know." Nora's breath caught in her throat. She had known, on some level, that they were moving toward this moment, but hearing the words aloud made it real in a way that anticipation never could. "I like you too," she said, the words coming out before she could second-guess them. "But I'm scared." "That's okay. I'm scared too." He took a small step closer. "We don't have to figure everything out tonight. We don't even have to call it anything. I just wanted you to know where I stand." She looked up at him, at the earnest expression on his face, at the way the cold had reddened his cheeks and the tips of his ears. He was not the kind of handsome that stopped traffic, but there was something about him, a steadiness, a depth, that made her feel safe. "I think I'd like to figure it out together," she said. The smile that spread across his face was worth every moment of fear. "Together," he repeated. "I like the sound of that." They started walking again, and this time, his hand brushed against hers. She let it. She let her fingers intertwine with his, and they walked through the frozen garden like that, two people learning to trust again. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of exams, papers, and stolen moments. Nora threw herself into her academic work with renewed energy, but she also made time for Gu Ming, coffee breaks between study sessions, late-night walks along the frozen paths, Saturday poetry readings that had become their sacred tradition. They were not officially dating. Neither of them had used the word girlfriend or boyfriend, but everyone around them seemed to know. Li Meng had started leaving them alone when Gu Ming came to the dormitory. The bookseller at the old bookshop greeted them with a knowing smile. Even Professor Li had made a comment about that young man from the economics department. Nora found that she did not mind. For the first time in her second life, she felt something that was not calculation or strategy or revenge. She felt simple, ordinary happiness. But happiness, she had learned, was a fragile thing, and the past had a way of coming back when you least expected it. It was the last week of finals when Zhou Yiming found her. She was leaving the library, her head full of exam notes and her body exhausted from 3 days of back-to-back tests, when he stepped out from behind a pillar and blocked her path. He looked terrible. His clothes were rumpled, his hair unwashed, his eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. He had lost weight, his cheekbones stood out sharply, and his jaw was covered in patchy stubble. "Nora," he said, his voice hoarse, "please, just give me 5 minutes." She stepped back, her body tensing. "We have nothing to talk about. Please." His voice cracked. "I'm begging you." She looked around. The courtyard was empty. Most students already finished with their exams and gone home for the break. The sky was gray and heavy with the promise of snow. 5 minutes, she said. He led her to a bench near the frozen fountain, but neither of them sat. Zhou Yiming paced in front of her, his hands shaking. "I've lost everything," he said. "My parents won't speak to me. My friends won't look at me. My probation means I can't even apply for the exchange program I was planning on. And Su Yun." He laughed bitterly. Su Yun told everyone the truth, about how it was her idea, how she convinced me, how she planned the whole thing. So Su Yun had finally told the truth. Nora filed that information away for later. "I'm sorry," Zhou Yiming continued, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for everything. For lying to you, for cheating on you, for letting her convince me that we were meant to be together. I was weak and stupid and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." Nora watched him with cold eyes. In her first life, she would have cried at this speech. She would have taken him back, believed his promises, let him destroy her again. "I don't forgive you," she said. His face crumpled. "Nora, I don't hate you either. I don't feel anything for you at all. You're a stranger to me now." She looked at him without warmth. "And I think that's worse than anger, isn't it? To know that you meant so little to me that I don't even have the energy to be angry." He stared at her, speechless. "Goodbye, Zhou Yiming. I hope you find a way to rebuild your life. But don't ever come looking for me again." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone by the frozen fountain. This time, she did not look back. She found Gu Ming waiting for her at the old bookshop, as he always was on Saturdays. He took one look at her face and set down his tea. "What happened?" "Zhou Yiming found me," he apologized. Gu Ming's expression flickered with something unreadable. "And I told him I didn't forgive him and walked away." He studied her for a long moment. "How do you feel?" "Tired, but also free." She sat down across from him. "I think I finally closed that door." "That's good." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm proud of you." She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. "Thank you for being patient with me. You're worth being patient for." The words settled in her chest like something solid and warm. She squeezed his hand and smiled. "I think I'm ready," she said, "to stop being careful." He raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" "It means," she took a breath, "it means I want to try, really try, with you." His smile was slow and radiant. "I've been ready since the day I met you. I was just waiting for you to catch up." She laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep and genuine. "I'm caught up now." The winter break arrived like a held breath finally released. The campus emptied as students scattered to their hometowns for the holiday, and Nora found herself alone in the dormitory for the first time in months. Li Meng had gone home to Guangzhou. Su Yun had moved out entirely, transferring to a university in her home province after the disciplinary debacle. The room that had once been full of noise and life was now silent. The 4 beds reduced to 2 occupied corners. Nora had decided to stay on campus for the break. Her parents had invited her home. But the thought of returning to her childhood bedroom, of facing her family's questions about the semester, felt overwhelming. She needed time alone, time to think, to plan, to process everything that had happened. Also, she admitted to herself, she did not want to be 3 provinces away from Ming. They spent the first week of break in a comfortable rhythm that felt almost domestic. He came to her dormitory in the mornings with coffee from the only cafe that stayed open during the holiday. And they studied together in the empty library. They cooked simple dinners in the graduate student kitchen, their shoulders brushing as they chopped vegetables and stirred noodles. They watched movies on his laptop, huddled together under a blanket against the cold. It was in these quiet moments that Nora began to feel something she had not allowed herself to feel in years. Safety. The sense that she could let her guard down, that she did not need to calculate every word and action, that she could simply exist, and that would be enough. One evening, as they sat on the floor of his sparse graduate apartment, a half-watched documentary flickering on the screen, Ming asked her a question that made her heart stop. "Nora, what happened to you before all this?" She looked at him, startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "when I met you, you were already a fortress. You had plans within plans within plans. You were ready for betrayal the way soldiers are ready for war. That kind of preparation doesn't come from one bad breakup. It comes from something deeper." Nora looked away, her chest tight. She had known this conversation would come eventually. She had prepared for it, rehearsed her answers. But now that the moment was here, the rehearsed answers felt hollow. She considered telling him the truth, the full truth, that she had lived another life, that she had died alone, that she had been given a second chance. But that was a secret she was not ready to share, not with anyone. "I had a difficult childhood," she said instead, which was also true. "My parents loved me, but they were distant. I learned early that the only person I could rely on was myself." He nodded slowly, accepting her answer without pushing. "And then Su Yun and Zhou Yiming confirmed what you already believed." "Yes." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They proved that even the people closest to you will betray you if given the right motivation." "I'm not going to betray you." The words were simple, but the conviction behind them made her breath catch. "You don't know that," she whispered. "I know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." He turned to face her fully. "And I know that I'm not the person I was 2 years ago. The plagiarism accusation changed me. It made me colder, more calculating. But meeting you," he reached out and took her hand. "Meeting you made me want to be warm again." Tears pricked at Nora's eyes. She blinked them back. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave and smart and wounded. I know you carry things you don't talk about. And I know that when you let yourself be soft, you're the most beautiful person I've ever met." The tears escaped, rolling down her cheeks. She did not try to stop them. "I don't deserve you," she said. "That's not for you to decide." He reached up and wiped her tears with his thumb. "Let me decide who I want to love." The word hung between them, love. Neither of them had said it before. It felt enormous and fragile and terrifying. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." He leaned in and kissed her, soft and warm. It was not their first kiss, that had happened a week ago, in the stacks of the empty library, spontaneous and giddy. But this kiss felt different. It felt like a promise. When they pulled apart, Nora rested her forehead against his. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she said. "Good. Because I already fell." She laughed. "And this time it was genuine and light. When? The first time I saw you in the hallway outside the hearing room. You had this look on your face, like you were in control of everything. Even when you were about to walk into a room full of people ready to judge you. I thought, that's the most dangerous person I've ever met. I need to know her." Dangerous. In the best way. He kissed her forehead. "You're not someone who just lets life happen to her. You make things happen. That's terrifying and beautiful." Nora leaned into him, letting herself be held. For the first time in 2 lives, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The second week of break brought a cold snap that made the campus feel like a frozen wasteland. Nora and Gu Ming spent most of their time indoors, bundled in layers, drinking endless cups of tea. On New Year's Eve, they climbed to the roof of the graduate student building to watch the fireworks. The city spread out below them, a carpet of lights, and in the distance, the first explosions of color began to bloom against the dark sky. "Happy New Year," Gu Ming said, his arm around her shoulders. "Happy New Year." Nora leaned her head against him. "I have a good feeling about this year." Yeah, I think things are going to be different." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I think so too." The fireworks continued, painting the sky in bursts of red and gold and blue. Nora watched them with a sense of peace she had not felt in years, not since her first life. Before everything had gone wrong, she thought about the year ahead. Her exams had gone well. She was confident she would finish the semester with top marks. The graduate school application was progressing. Professor Lee had agreed to write her a recommendation. And then there was Gu Ming, solid and warm beside her. A future she had not planned for but was beginning to want desperately. She still thought about the old life sometimes, the loneliness, the bitterness, the cold hospital room. But those thoughts were growing fainter, like a photograph left too long in the sun. The world she was building now was brighter, warmer, full of possibilities she had never imagined. When the fireworks ended and the crowd below began to disperse, they climbed down from the roof and walked back to his apartment. The streets were quiet, the cold biting, but Nora did not feel the chill. She felt only warmth. Later, as they lay together in the dark, Gu Ming's arm wrapped around her. She let herself imagine a future. Graduation, graduate school, mornings like this one, ordinary and precious. A life built not on revenge, but on something gentler. "Nora," his voice was soft in the darkness. Thank you for giving me a chance." She smiled, her eyes closed. "Thank you for being worth it." He laughed softly, and she felt the vibration of it through his chest. She drifted off to sleep, warm and safe, the new year stretching ahead of her like a promise. The semester resumed in late February, and with it came a flurry of activity. Nora's grades arrived, top of her class in every subject. Professor Lee formally invited her to apply for the graduate program. The application deadline was March 15th, and she had less than a month to prepare her materials. She threw herself into the work with characteristic intensity. But this time, she was not alone. Gu Ming helped her revise her personal statement, pointing out weak arguments and suggesting stronger phrasings. He quizzed her on interview questions, sat with her through late-night writing sessions, and brought her coffee when her energy flagged. "You're going to get in," he told her one evening, as she slumped over her laptop in exhaustion. "You're the most qualified candidate they've seen in years. You have to say that. You're biased." "I'm biased because I know you." He sat down beside her and pulled up her essay on the screen. "Look at this. Your analysis of narrative structure in post-reform literature is genuinely groundbreaking. Any professor reading this will see your potential immediately." She looked at the screen, then at him. "What would I do without you?" "Crush your exams and get into graduate school anyway," he said with a grin, but maybe with a few more stress wrinkles. She laughed and leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you." The words slipped out before she could catch them. She felt him go still beside her. "Say that again," he said, his voice careful. She lifted her head and looked at him. "I love you, Gu Ming." His smile was slow and radiant. "I love you too, Nora Chen." They kissed, and the world outside, the exams, the applications, the complicated pasts they carried, faded into the background. For this moment, there was only the two of them, and the future they were building together. March arrived like a lion, with howling winds and sheets of cold rain that turned the campus into a gray, dripping landscape. Nora submitted her graduate application on the 15th, exactly at the deadline, and then spent the next 2 weeks in a state of suspended anxiety. "You need to relax," Gu Ming told her for the 5th time, as they sat in the cafe near campus. "You've done everything you can. Now it's just waiting." "I hate waiting." "I know. But worrying won't make the decision come faster." She sighed and stirred her tea. "I know you're right. But it's hard. This is the first thing I've really wanted since." She trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. "Since I came back to life." she thought. Since I stopped living for revenge and started living for myself. Since you stopped running on pure spite. Gu Ming supplied. And she laughed despite herself. That's one way to put it. Spite is a good fuel for short distances. But you're in this for the long haul now. He reached across the table and took her hand. And you're not running alone anymore. She squeezed his hand, grateful for his steady presence. He had a way of making the world feel manageable, of breaking down overwhelming things into smaller, solvable pieces. What would I do without you? She asked. Not for the first time. Probably be fine. But I'm glad you don't have to find out. March crawled by in a haze of classes and anxious waiting. Nora threw herself into her coursework to distract herself, reading ahead in her syllabi, writing papers that earned her professor's praise. She was determined to finish the semester strong, regardless of what the graduate committee decided. Li Meng had returned from break with a new haircut and a new energy. She and Nora had grown closer over the past months, bonding over their shared dislike of cafeteria food and their mutual love of terrible reality TV. They had started a routine of watching shows together on Friday nights, ordering takeout and judging contestants with merciless precision. You seem happier, Li Meng said one evening, as they watched a dating show contestant fail spectacularly at a cooking challenge. Like, genuinely happier, not the fake kind you used to do. Nora considered this. I am happier. Is it because of the grad school thing? Partly. Mostly because of Gu Ming. Li Meng grinned. I knew it. You've got that glow. What glow? The I'm falling in love and it's terrifying and amazing glow. I've seen it before. Nora threw a pillow at her, but she was smiling. It was true. She realized. She was happy, not in the explosive, dramatic way she had imagined happiness would feel, but in a quiet, steady way that suffused her days with warmth. She woke up looking forward to things. She went to sleep feeling content. The old bitterness was still there, buried beneath layers of new experiences. But it no longer defined her. She was becoming someone new, someone she actually liked. The acceptance letter came on April 2nd. Nora was in the library when her phone buzzed with an email notification. She saw the subject line, Graduate Program Admission Decision, and her heart stopped. She opened the email with shaking hands. Dear Miss Chen, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the Master of Arts program in Modern Chinese Literature at Jiangnan University, beginning in the fall semester. Your application was exceptionally strong, and we look forward to welcoming you to our academic community. She read the words 3 times, unable to fully process them. Then she let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, drawing startled looks from the students around her. She grabbed her phone and dialed Gu Ming. Hello, I got in. Her voice cracked. I got into the program. There was a beat of silence, and then Gu Ming's voice, warm and triumphant. I knew you would. Congratulations, Nora. She couldn't stop smiling. Thank you. For everything. I didn't do anything. You earned this. You helped. More than you know. Then we should celebrate. Dinner tonight. My treat. I'd love that. She hung up and sat in the library, staring at the email on her phone, the words blurring as tears filled her eyes. She had done it. She had rebuilt her life from the ashes of her first existence, and she had built something real. They celebrated at a small restaurant off campus, a place Gu Ming had discovered that served the best hand-pulled noodles in the city. The atmosphere was warm and noisy, filled with the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation. To Nora Chen, Gu Ming said, raising his glass of plum wine, the soon-to-be graduate student, the master of modern literature, and the most stubbornly determined person I've ever met. Nora laughed and clinked her glass against his. To Gu Ming, the man who saw through my walls and decided to stay. Best decision I ever made. They ate and talked and laughed. And Nora felt the knot of anxiety that had been living in her chest since her rebirth finally loosened. She had been so focused on revenge, on survival, on proving she could win this time, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to simply enjoy a moment. What are you thinking about? Gu Ming asked, noticing her distant expression. I'm thinking about how different my life is now compared to 6 months ago. Good different, the best different. She reached across the table and took his hand. I was so angry when I woke up that day. I had this whole plan for revenge. I was going to destroy them and then disappear into my studies and never let anyone close again. What changed? She looked at him, at the warmth in his eyes, at the way he held her hand like it was something precious. You changed it. You made me want to be happy instead of just victorious. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Then my work here is done. Your work is never done, she said, smiling. I'm high maintenance. I know. I'm prepared. She laughed, and the sound was light and free. April brought spring to the campus in earnest. The trees budded, the frozen ground softened, and students emerged from winter hibernation like bears emerging from caves. The campus was alive again, full of color and noise and the electric energy of a new season. Nora walked through the main courtyard on a warm afternoon, a stack of books in her arms, and felt like she was seeing the world in color for the first time. The fountain had been turned back on, its water sparkling in the sunlight. Students sat on the grass, reading and talking and laughing. Couples walked hand in hand along the paths. She saw Suyin once, across the courtyard. They made eye contact for a brief moment, and Nora felt a flicker of something, not hatred, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Two people who had shared a history that could never be undone. Suyin looked away first and walked in the opposite direction. Nora did not watch her go. She had more important things to focus on. Her phone buzzed. A message from Gu Ming. Meet me at the greenhouse. I found something you'll want to see. She smiled and changed direction, walking toward the botanical garden at the edge of campus. The greenhouse was warm and humid, filled with the scent of earth and growing things. She found Gu Ming near the back, standing in front of a cluster of flowers she didn't recognize. What are these? She asked. Peonies. They're starting to bloom. He pointed to one that was just opening, its petals a deep, velvety red. I remembered you said you liked peonies. She had told him that weeks ago, in passing, during one of their long conversations about nothing in particular. She had not expected him to remember. You remembered, she said, touched. I remember everything you tell me. She stepped closer and looked at the flowers. They were beautiful, their petals unfolding with a grace that seemed almost deliberate. The sunlight filtered through the glass roof of the greenhouse, casting everything in a warm, golden light. I used to think that happiness was something that happened to other people, she said quietly, that I was somehow not made for it, that my fate was to struggle and survive and never really feel at peace. And now, she turned to face him. Now I think I was wrong. I think happiness is something you choose, something you build, piece by piece, day by day, and I'm choosing it now, with you. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, slow and deep. The greenhouse was warm around them, the peonies blooming, and Nora felt like she was blooming too. I love you, she said against his lips. I love you too, he replied. Forever. She believed him. Final season arrived for the second time in Nora's second life, and she faced it with a confidence she had never felt before. The exams were challenging, but she had prepared thoroughly, and the knowledge that graduate school was already secured lifted the weight of performance anxiety from her shoulders. I'm going to miss this place, she said one evening, as she and Gu Ming sat on the steps of the main academic building, watching the sunset paint the campus in shades of orange and pink. You're not leaving. You'll be right here for 2 more years. I know, but it'll be different. I'll be a graduate student, not an undergraduate. I'll have a different schedule, different responsibilities. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I'll miss the simplicity of being just another undergrad. Life gets more complicated as you go. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I know, she sighed contentedly. I'm just feeling nostalgic for a time that hasn't even ended yet. That's called being human. He wrapped his arm around her. I do that all the time. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened. The campus was quiet. Most students already retreated to their dormitories to study for the next day's exams. The air was warm and soft, carrying the scent of blooming flowers. Gu Ming, Nora said after a while. What are you going to do after you finish your master's? He was quiet for a moment, considering. I've been thinking about that. I have a few options. I could apply for a PhD program, or I could look for work in policy research. There are think tanks in Beijing and Shanghai that focus on economic development. Would you want to stay here? Here as in Jiangnan. Or here as in with you? Both. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. I want to be wherever you are. If that means staying here, I stay here. If it means moving somewhere else, I move somewhere else. As long as we're together, I don't care about the location. Nora's heart swelled. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person's choices. I'm not putting pressure on anyone. I'm telling you my priority. She kissed his cheek. I don't know what I did to deserve you. You existed. That was enough. The last exam of the semester was modern Chinese literature, Nora's best subject. She finished it in just over an hour, reviewed her answers twice, and turned it in with a feeling of quiet satisfaction. As she walked out of the examination hall, she saw Professor Lee standing near the door, a smile on her face. Miss Chen, I trust the exam went well. I think so. I felt prepared. I'm sure you did. You've been one of my best students this semester. Professor Lee paused. I've been meaning to ask, have you thought about what you'd like to focus on in graduate school? I know you mentioned narrative structures and social change, but I'd love to hear more about your specific interests. Nora's eyes lit up. I've been reading a lot about how women writers in the 1980s used domestic narratives to comment on political changes. I'm particularly interested in how the kitchen, as a literary space, became a site of resistance and negotiation. Professor Lee nodded thoughtfully. That's a fascinating angle. I know a few scholars working in that area. I could introduce you to them. I would love that. Thank you. Professor Lee. Of course. You have real potential. Nora. I look forward to seeing what you accomplish. Nora walked away from the conversation walking on air. For the first time in 2 lives, she felt like her future was bright, not in spite of her past, but because of what she had learned from it. Summer arrived, and with it a lazy warmth that transformed the campus into a sleepy paradise. The semester was over, and Nora had nothing to do but wait for graduate school to begin in September. She and Gu Ming spent the summer exploring the city around the university. They visited museums and parks, discovered hidden tea houses and second-hand bookstores, took day trips to nearby mountains and lakes. They cooked elaborate meals together, watched the stars from the rooftop of his building, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. It was the happiest summer of Nora's life, both lives combined. One afternoon, as they lay on a blanket in the botanical garden, the sun warm on their faces, Gu Ming turned to her with a curious expression. Can I ask you something? Of course. You never told me the whole story. About what happened with Su Yun and Zhou Yiming. I know the broad strokes, but I always felt like there was more. Nora was quiet for a moment. She had kept so many secrets, about her first life, about her calculated revenge, about the darkness that still lived somewhere in the depths of her heart. But Gu Ming had been honest with her from the beginning. He deserved the same. Not the part about the rebirth. That was too strange, too unbelievable, too much a burden to place on someone else's shoulders. But the rest, the cold planning, the deliberate non-intervention, the satisfaction she had felt watching her revenge unfold. She could tell him that. I didn't just not stop them, she said slowly. I set them up to fall. He did not look surprised. I figured. I recorded Su Yun's confession. I documented everything. I sent the evidence to the dean at exactly the right time. I made sure their parents knew what they had done before they had a chance to spin their own story. She took a breath. I didn't just watch them fall. I pushed them. And she looked at him, confused by his calm reaction. And doesn't that bother you? Should it? They were in the wrong. What they did was terrible. But I didn't just let karma take its course. I engineered it. Gu Ming sat up and looked at her with steady eyes. Nora, they betrayed you. They planned to run away together behind your back. And they were going to let you take the fall for it. You defended yourself. You fought back with the weapons you had, information, timing, preparation. That's not evil. That's survival. But I enjoyed it, she whispered, the confession tasting bitter on her tongue. I enjoyed watching them suffer. Is that still true? She thought about it, about the hollow feeling she had felt after the hearing, about the way thoughts of revenge had faded from her mind as she built her new life, about how, When she saw Soo-yun in the courtyard, she had felt nothing at all. "No," she said, surprised by her own answer. "I don't think I do anymore." "Then that's what matters. You did what you had to do to survive. And then you moved on. That's not revenge. That's growth." Tears pricked at her eyes. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" "I don't. I'm just saying what I believe." He lay back down beside her, his hand finding hers. "I'm not going to judge you for protecting yourself. I did the same thing. Remember, I destroyed the person who tried to destroy me. And I'm not sorry for it." "You're not." "No. He would have done the same to me if I hadn't acted first. The only difference is that I acted in self-defense, not revenge." "And which one was I acting in?" He was quiet for a long moment. "At first, revenge. But by the end, self-defense. You were making sure they couldn't hurt you again." Nora let his words sink in. She had been carrying guilt about her actions, feeling like she had become as cold and calculating as the people who had hurt her. But Gu Ming's perspective offered an alternative. She had done what she needed to do, and then she had let it go. Maybe that was not something to feel guilty about. Maybe that was something to be proud of. "Thank you," she said, "for understanding. Always." He squeezed her hand. "I'll always understand." August arrived, hot and humid, and with it came a letter that Nora had not expected. It was from Soo-yun. She almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity won, and she slit the envelope with a kitchen knife. The letter was handwritten, the paper creased and slightly stained. Soo-yun's handwriting was as neat as ever, but there was a tremor in the strokes that suggested emotional distress. Dear Nora, I'm writing this because I can't say it in person. I've transferred to a university in my hometown. I won't be coming back to Jeongnan. I wanted to tell you that I know what you did. I know you recorded our conversation. I know you sent that evidence to the dean. I know you planned everything. I'm not writing this to accuse you. I'm writing to tell you that I understand. If I had been in your position, I probably would have done the same thing. I was a terrible friend. I let my selfishness destroy our friendship, and I hurt you in ways I can never repair. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to become a better person. I started therapy. I'm working on understanding why I did what I did. I hope you find happiness. I hope you build a life that has nothing to do with me or Yiming. You deserve that. I'm sorry for everything. Soo-yun *. Nora read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into a drawer. She did not cry. She did not feel triumphant. She felt a quiet sense of closure, like turning the last page of a book she had been reading for a very long time. The chapter of her life involving Soo-yun was finally over. Not with a bang, but with a letter, imperfect and human and strangely hopeful. She closed the drawer and walked out of her dormitory into the August sunshine. Gu Ming was waiting for her by the fountain, 2 cups of iced tea in his hands. "You look like you just finished something," he said, handing her a cup. "I did." She took a sip of the tea, cold and sweet. "I finished the last chapter." "Good. Ready to start a new one." She smiled, the sun warm on her face, his hand in hers. "More than ready." September arrived with a new academic year and a new identity. Nora Chen, graduate student. She walked into her first seminar with a mix of nervousness and excitement that felt almost foreign. The last time she had started something new, she had been fueled by vengeance and cold calculation. This time, she was starting something she actually wanted, a future she had chosen for herself. The seminar room was small, with a long wooden table surrounded by 10 chairs. Her classmates were a mix of new faces and familiar ones. Several of her undergraduate classmates had also been accepted into the program. Professor Lee sat at the head of the table, a stack of syllabi in front of her. "Welcome to Modern Chinese Literature 501. Professor Lee began. "This seminar will focus on the intersection of narrative form and social change in post-reform China. I've structured the syllabus to move chronologically, but I encourage you to make connections across time periods. Some of the most interesting work in this field comes from unexpected juxtapositions." Nora took notes as Professor Lee spoke, her pen moving steadily across the page. She was here. She had made it. The knowledge settled in her chest like a warm weight. After the seminar, she walked to the graduate student lounge, where she found Gu Ming waiting for her. He was sitting on a worn couch, reading a book, but he looked up when she entered. How was it? Amazing. Terrifying. I think I'm the youngest person in the cohort. That just means you're ahead of schedule. He closed his book and stood. I made lunch. Well, I made rice and reheated leftovers. But it's the thought that counts. It absolutely counts. They ate together in the small kitchenette attached to the lounge, sitting on mismatched stools and talking about their respective days. Gu Ming's thesis was progressing well. He had received positive feedback from his advisor and was on track to defend in the spring. After I defend, I'll have to start thinking seriously about jobs, he said, stirring his soup. There's a research institute in Beijing that's been in touch, and another in Shanghai. Would you want to go? I'd want us to go together. He looked at her. What about you? After your master's, would you consider a PhD? Nora considered the question. In her first life, she had never imagined herself as an academic. She had been too broken, too focused on survival. But now, maybe, she said, I want to see how this year goes first. That's fair. We have time. They did have time. That was the gift of her second chance, not just the opportunity to avoid her past mistakes, but the luxury of a future that stretched out before her, full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. The semester settled into a rhythm that was both demanding and deeply satisfying. Nora's coursework was challenging. She was reading more than she had ever read before, writing papers that pushed her intellectual boundaries, engaging in seminar discussions that sharpened her thinking. She was growing, not just as a student, but as a person. Outside of class, she and Gu Ming continued to build their life together. They had developed rituals: Sunday morning breakfast at the cafe near his apartment, Wednesday evening walks through the botanical garden, Friday night takeout and terrible movies with Li Meng and whoever else wanted to join. It was ordinary. It was beautiful. It was everything Nora had never known she wanted. One evening, as they sat on the roof of his building watching the stars, Nora found herself thinking about her first life, not with bitterness or regret, but with a strange sense of gratitude. If she had not lived that life, if she had not been betrayed, broken, and left to die alone, she would not be here now. She would not have learned the lessons that made her careful planning possible. She would not have developed the strength to walk away from Suyun and Zhou Yiming. She would not have been ready to recognize Gu Ming when he appeared in her life. The suffering had not been meaningless. It had been the crucible that forged her into someone capable of this happiness. What are you thinking about? Gu Ming asked, his voice soft in the darkness. How strange life is. How the worst things can lead to the best things if you're willing to learn from them. That's a very Buddhist way of looking at it. She laughed. Maybe. I think I just finally understand that nothing is wasted. Not the pain. Not the joy. It all adds up to something. He kissed her temple. You're getting philosophical in your old age. I'm 22. Ancient. She shoved him playfully, and he pulled her closer, laughing. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal, and Nora felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. October brought the second autumn of her second life, and with it, the anniversary of the day everything had changed. 1 year since she had woken up in that dormitory room, staring at a water-stained ceiling, her heart full of revenge. She marked the day by walking to the train station, the same station where she had watched Suyun and Zhou Yiming board their train to destruction. She stood in the same cafe, ordered the same iced tea, and sat at the same table. The station was busy, as it always was. People rushed past with suitcases and backpacks, their faces focused on their destinations. A year ago, Nora had been one of them in spirit, rushing toward her carefully planned revenge, her heart cold and focused. Now, she sat calmly, sipping her tea, watching the flow of humanity. She was not rushing anywhere. She had time. She had patience. She had a life that was worth living slowly. Her phone buzzed. A message from Gu Ming. Missing you. Come home soon. She smiled at the word, home. His apartment had become that, not because of the space itself, but because he was there. On my way, she replied. She finished her tea, left the cafe, and walked out of the station without looking back. When she arrived at his apartment, He was cooking. The small kitchen was filled with the scent of garlic and ginger, and he was humming to himself as he stirred a pan. "You're back early," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. I went to the train station." He paused, understanding dawning on his face. "The train station. The one where I watched them leave. It's been a year." He set down the spatula and turned to face her fully. "How do you feel?" "Free." She leaned against the doorframe, looking at him. "I think I finally let go of the last of it. The anger. The bitterness. I walked into that station carrying the weight of what they did to me, and I walked out carrying nothing. That's huge. Nora." "I know." She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, resting her head against his chest. "Thank you for being part of this. For being part of my healing. Thank you for letting me in." They stood like that for a long moment, the pan sizzling forgotten on the stove, the world reduced to the warm circle of each other's arms. "Dinner's going to burn," she murmured. "I don't care." "I do. I'm hungry." He laughed and kissed the top of her head before turning back to the stove. "You're impossible. You love me anyway. Always." The winter of Nora's second year brought snow, the kind that transformed the campus into a white wonderland. She stood at the window of Gu Ming's apartment, watching the flakes fall, a cup of hot tea warming her hands. "You're staring again," Gu Ming said from the couch, where he was grading papers. "It's beautiful. I can't help it. You say that every time it snows." "Because it's true every time it snows." He set down his red pen and came to stand beside her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You're also avoiding your thesis outline." "I prefer the word contemplating." "You prefer the word procrastinating." She laughed and leaned back into him. "Maybe a little. But I've been working so hard all semester. I deserve a few minutes of snowgazing." "You deserve more than a few minutes. You deserve the whole winter." He rested his chin on her shoulder. "Your proposal was really good. By the way, Professor Lee sent me a copy." She did. She had not known that. Her thesis proposal, an exploration of how women writers in the 1990s used domestic spaces as narrative frameworks for critiquing social change, had been months in the making. She had poured everything into it, every ounce of her intellectual energy, and she was proud of the result. She said it was one of the most original proposals she'd seen in years. Warmth spread through Nora's chest. "She said that." "She did. I'm not supposed to tell you, but I think you should know." She turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for telling me. You would have found out eventually, but I wanted to see you smile." She did smile, wide and genuine. "I love you. I love you too." He kissed her forehead. "Now stop staring at the snow and get back to work. You have a thesis to write. You're such a taskmaster. You're such a procrastinator. We're perfect for each other." He laughed and let her go, and she returned to her laptop with renewed energy. The outline was waiting for her, a blank document that she was determined to fill with something meaningful. January brought Gu Ming's thesis defense. Nora sat in the back of the conference room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as he presented his research on the economic impacts of industrial policy in post-reform China. He spoke with confidence and clarity, fielding questions from the committee with ease. When it was over, and the committee congratulated him on a successful defense, Nora felt tears streaming down her face. She hadn't realized she had been crying until Gu Ming found her afterward, his own eyes bright with emotion. "Why are you crying?" he asked, laughing. "I'm proud of you." She threw her arms around him. "You did it. You're done." "I'm done with the thesis. I still have to finish the semester. Details." He held her tight. "Thank you for being here. For everything. I wouldn't have missed it for the world." They celebrated that night with dinner at their favorite noodle restaurant, followed by a long walk through the snow-covered campus. The world was quiet and white, their footsteps the only sound. "What's next?" Nora asked, her hand in his. "I have an interview with the Shanghai Research Institute next week, and Beijing wants to schedule one too." "Both." "That's amazing." "It is. But it also means I have to make a choice. A good problem to have." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Whatever I choose, I want you to come with me." Nora's heart skipped. "Gu Ming, I know you have 2 more years of your master's. I'm not asking you to leave school. But after you finish, He took both her hands in his. After you finish, I want us to be together, wherever that is. That's 2 years away. I know, but I also know what I want. And I want you. She looked at him standing there in the snow, his cheeks red from the cold, his eyes sincere and hopeful. This was the man who had seen through her walls, who had understood her darkness and chosen to stay. This was the man she wanted to build a future with. 2 years isn't that long, she said. We can do 2 years. Is that a yes? That's a yes. He kissed her, the snow falling around them, and Nora felt like she was living in a dream. But it was real. It was all real. February brought the Chinese New Year, and with it, a decision. Nora had been invited to spend the holiday with Gu Ming's family in his hometown, a small city 3 hours north of the university. She was nervous. Meeting a boyfriend's family was always a big step, but for someone like Nora, who had been burned so badly by people she trusted, the prospect was terrifying. What if they don't like me? She asked as they sat on the train, the landscape blurring past the window. They'll love you. You can't know that. I can. You're smart, kind, hardworking, and beautiful. What's not to love? I'm also carrying a lot of baggage. Everyone has baggage. My parents know about my past. They're not going to judge you for yours. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Okay, I trust you. Good. Because I'm right. He was right. As it turned out, Gu Ming's parents were warm and welcoming. His mother fussing over Nora like she was already family. His father engaging her in conversation about her research with genuine interest. The family home was modest and cozy, filled with the smells of home cooking and the sounds of laughter. On New Year's Eve, they sat around the dinner table, sharing a hot pot. The steam rose between them, carrying the spicy aroma of the broth. Gu Ming's mother kept piling food onto Nora's plate, insisting she eat more. And Gu Ming's father told stories about his son's childhood that made everyone laugh. He was such a serious child, his mother said, smiling, always reading, always thinking. I worried he would never find someone who could keep up with him. And then I found Nora, Gu Ming said, reaching under the table to take her hand. Who thinks even faster than I do? Impossible, his father said, but he was smiling. After dinner, they walked to the river to watch the fireworks. The sky exploded in color, red and gold and green, the cracks echoing off the water. Nora leaned against Gu Ming, his arm around her shoulders, and felt like she belonged. Happy New Year, he said. Happy New Year. She looked up at him. I think this is going to be a good year. I think all our years are going to be good, because we'll be together. She kissed him, and the fireworks continued to burst above them, painting their future in bright, hopeful colors. March brought the first anniversary of her graduate school acceptance. Nora marked it by submitting the first chapter of her thesis to Professor Lee, who responded with detailed feedback and enthusiastic praise. Your argument is coming together beautifully, she wrote in her comments. This chapter could stand alone as a publishable paper. I'd encourage you to consider submitting it to the Journal of Modern Chinese Literary Studies. Nora read the comment 5 times, a smile spreading across her face. A publishable paper. Her work was good enough to be published. She called Gu Ming immediately. Professor Lee thinks my first chapter could be published. That's amazing. But not surprising. Your work is excellent. I can't believe this is happening. A year ago, I was. She stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. A year ago, you were starting something new. And look where you are now. I know. It's incredible. That's because you're incredible. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Thank you for always believing in me. It's easy to believe in someone who's determined to prove everyone right. I love you. I love you too. Now get back to work. You have a paper to publish. Spring arrived again, and with it, the final semester of Nora's first year of graduate school. She sat in the same library where she had spent countless hours. But this time she was not studying for exams or crafting revenge plans. She was revising her first academic paper, readying it for submission to the journal Professor Lee had recommended. The campus was the same. The buildings, the trees, the paths, they had not changed. But Nora had. She was not the girl who had woken up in that dormitory room 2 years ago. her heart full of rage and her mind full of strategies. She was someone new, someone who had built a life worth living. Her phone buzzed. A message from Gu Ming. Done with edits. I have a surprise. She smiled and typed back. Almost. What kind of surprise? The kind you have to see in person. Meet me at the greenhouse. She saved her document, packed her laptop, and walked across campus to the botanical garden. The greenhouse was warm and humid, filled with the scent of earth and growing things. She found him near the back, standing beside a cluster of peonies in full bloom. They're beautiful, she said, approaching. Is this the surprise? Part of it. He turned to face her, and she saw that he was nervous, a rare sight. His hands were clasped behind his back, and there was a tension in his shoulders that she had learned to recognize. Gu Ming, what's going on? He took a breath. I've been thinking about this for a long time. About us. About the future. About what I want to say to you. He paused, searching for words. When I met you, you were the most guarded person I had ever encountered. You had walls so high I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to see over them. Nora said nothing, her heart beating faster. But I also saw something else. I saw someone who had been hurt deeply, who had learned to protect herself because no one else would. And I thought if I could earn her trust, it would be the greatest achievement of my life. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Nora's breath caught. This isn't a proposal, he said quickly, seeing her expression. Not yet. We have time for that. But it is a promise. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a thin silver band with a small pearl set in the center. My grandmother gave this to me before she passed, he said. She told me to give it to someone I would love for the rest of my life. I've been carrying it for 3 years, waiting for the right person. Nora's eyes filled with tears. I'm giving it to you now, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. Not as an engagement ring, as a promise ring. A promise that I will love you, support you, and stand by you for as long as you'll let me. A promise that when the time is right, I'll be on one knee asking you to marry me. Gu Ming. She could barely speak. You don't have to answer now. I just wanted you to know that I'm all in, that I'm not going anywhere, that you're not alone anymore, and you never will be again. She stepped forward and threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Yes, she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. Yes, I'll wear your ring. Yes, I'll wait for that proposal. Yes, I'll spend the rest of my life with you. He held her tight, and she felt him tremble. I was so scared you'd say no. I could never say no to you. He pulled back and took the ring from the box. With careful, reverent hands, he slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Nora looked at the ring, the pearl catching the greenhouse light, and felt like she was looking at a symbol of everything she had built. Trust, love, a future. I love you, she said, and the words felt like a prayer. I love you too, forever. They kissed in the greenhouse, surrounded by blooming peonies, and Nora felt the last of her walls crumble away. 2 months later, Nora's paper was accepted for publication. She received the email while sitting in her small graduate student office, surrounded by stacks of books and notes. She read it once, twice, 3 times, and then she let out a scream of joy that made the graduate assistant next door knock on her wall in concern. I'm fine, she shouted. I just got published. A muffled, congratulations, came through the wall. She called her parents first. Her mother cried. Her father told her he was proud of her, and she could hear the emotion in his voice. They had been distant for so long. But this was something they could understand and celebrate. Then she called Gu Ming, who insisted on taking her out to celebrate that evening. They went to the same noodle restaurant where they had celebrated his thesis defense, sitting at the same table. The familiarity of it made Nora's heart swell. To Dr. Chen, Gu Ming said, raising his glass. Soon to be, to Dr. Gu Ming, who already is. They clinked glasses, and Nora took a sip of the plum wine, savoring the sweetness. I can't believe this is my life, she said. A year ago, I was. A year ago, you were a force of nature, determined to burn the world down. She laughed. And now you're a force of nature, determined to build something beautiful. He reached across the table and took her hand, the pearl ring glinting on her finger. Same power, different direction. I like this direction better. Me too. The summer passed in a golden haze. Nora worked on her thesis, revised her paper for publication, and spent lazy afternoons with Gu Ming. They traveled to the coast for a weekend, walking along the beach and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and orange. On the last day of summer, they sat on the rooftop of his building, watching the stars emerge. The city hummed below them, distant and warm. Nora, Gu Ming said, his voice soft in the darkness. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met? She considered the question. In her first life, they had not met. She had been too consumed by her own tragedy to notice the quiet graduate student who passed her in the hallways. He had been just another stranger in a world full of strangers. I try not to, she said. It's too painful to imagine. I think about it sometimes. I think about all the small decisions that led to that day in the hallway. If I had been 5 minutes earlier or later, if I had taken a different route, if I had been looking at my phone instead of ahead. But you weren't. You were there, and I was there, and we found each other. Fate. Something like that. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I don't believe in destiny. I believe in choices. And I choose you. Every day. He kissed her temple. And I choose you. The stars continued to wheel overhead, and Nora felt at peace. She had been given a second chance, and she had used it not for revenge, but for creation. She had built a life from the ashes of her old one, and it was more beautiful than she had ever imagined. Graduation came on a warm June day, 2 years after her rebirth. Nora stood in her cap and gown, the pearl ring on her finger, her family in the audience. Her parents had made the trip to see her graduate with honors. Gu Ming's parents were there too, sitting together in the row behind them, already treating her like their daughter. And Gu Ming himself was in the audience, his eyes fixed on her, a smile on his face that she felt in her bones. When her name was called, she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. The dean shook her hand and said something about her promising future. The audience applauded, but all Nora could think about was the journey that had brought her here. The girl who had woken up in that dormitory room, her heart full of revenge, had not known that this was waiting for her. She had thought that winning meant destroying her enemies. She had thought that safety meant isolation. She had thought that love was a weakness she could not afford. She had been wrong about all of it. Winning, she had learned, was not about making other people lose. It was about building something that could not be taken from you. Safety was not about walls, it was about trust, carefully earned and courageously given. And love was not a weakness. It was the strongest thing in the world. After the ceremony, she found Gu Ming in the crowd. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, her cap flying off, her laughter ringing across the courtyard. You did it, he said, setting her down. You're officially a master of literature. I know. It still doesn't feel real. It's real. You're real. This is real. He looked at her, his eyes bright. I'm so proud of you. She kissed him, not caring who was watching. Thank you. For everything. I didn't do anything. You did everything. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You saw me when I was trying to disappear. You loved me when I was convinced I was unlovable. That wasn't hard. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. She blinked back tears. What did I do to deserve you? You existed. You survived. You chose to try again. He took her hand, the ring catching the sunlight. And you said yes when I asked you to stay. I'll always say yes. That evening, they returned to the greenhouse. It was their place now, the spot where their future had begun to take shape. The peonies were in full bloom, their petals a deep, velvety red. I have something to ask you, Gu Ming said, his voice suddenly serious. Nora's heart skipped. What? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring box, a different one, smaller, velvet. He knelt down on one knee, and Nora's hands flew to her mouth. Nora Chen, he said, his voice trembling. I've loved you since the moment I saw you in that hallway. I've loved you through your walls and your plans and your careful distance. I've loved you as you learned to trust, to open up, to let me in. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, a diamond. Simple and elegant. Catching the greenhouse light. I promised you I would ask properly when the time was right. The time is right. Will you marry me? Nora was crying. She couldn't stop the tears streaming down her face. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger beside the pearl ring she already wore. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and hope and gratitude he carried. They stood in the greenhouse, surrounded by flowers, the future stretching out before them like an endless summer. 1 year later, on a warm June afternoon, Nora Chen and Gu Ming were married in the botanical garden, surrounded by family and friends. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. Nora wore a white dress that brushed the ground, and she carried a bouquet of peonies. Gu Ming wore a gray suit and could not stop smiling. Li Meng was her maid of honor. Professor Li sat in the front row, wiping tears from her eyes. Gu Ming's parents held hands and beamed. When they exchanged vows, Nora's voice was steady and clear. I was lost when I met you, she said, looking into his eyes. I had been hurt, and I had built walls around myself to make sure I would never be hurt again. But you saw through those walls. You didn't tear them down, you helped me open the door from the inside. You taught me that trust is not a weakness. You taught me that love is not a transaction. You taught me that the past does not have to define the future. She squeezed his hands. I promise to spend the rest of my life choosing you, every day, in every way, for as long as we both shall live. Gu Ming's eyes were bright with tears. He took a breath and began his vows. Nora, when I met you, I was still carrying the weight of my own past. I had been betrayed, and I had hardened myself against the world. I thought that being cold was the same as being strong. But you showed me that true strength is not in walls and defenses. True strength is in vulnerability, in trust, in the courage to love even when you know it might hurt. You are the bravest person I have ever met. You are the smartest, the kindest, the most beautiful, inside and out. And I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you are loved. The crowd sighed collectively as they exchanged rings. When the officiant pronounced them married, Gu Ming kissed her like he had been waiting his whole life for this moment. And in a way, he had. The reception was held in the banquet hall of the university's guest house. There was food and music and laughter. Nora danced with her father, who told her he was proud of her. She danced with Gu Ming's father, who welcomed her to the family with tears in his eyes. She danced with Li Meng, who whispered, "I told you so," in her ear. And she danced with Gu Ming, their bodies moving together like they had been doing this for years. Happy? He asked, his forehead against hers. The happiest. Good. Because we have the rest of our lives to be even happier. She kissed him, and the world fell away. Late that night, after the guests had gone and the music had stopped, Nora stood alone on the balcony of their hotel room. The city spread out below her, a carpet of lights, and the sky above was full of stars. She looked at the ring on her finger. She thought about the girl who had woken up in that dormitory room, her heart full of revenge, her mind full of plans. That girl had thought she was prepared for anything, but she had not been prepared for this. She had not been prepared for love that healed instead of wounded, for trust that grew instead of withered, for a future that was not about surviving, but about thriving. Footsteps behind her, arms wrapped around her waist. Gu Ming rested his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? How different everything is from what I planned. Is that a bad thing? She turned in his arms and looked at him, her husband, her partner, her future. No, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. He kissed her softly. I love you, Nora Gu. She smiled. She had taken his name, a small symbol of the new identity they were building together. I love you too, Gu Ming. Forever. The stars continued to wheel overhead, indifferent and eternal. But Nora did not feel small beneath them. She felt part of something vast and beautiful, a life that was hers to live, a love that was hers to keep, a future that stretched out before her like an endless horizon. She had been given a second chance, and she had used it to build something that would last. That, she thought, was the greatest victory of all.